So I'm honored today and very privileged to have my guest on, Ben from Suspicious Observers. He has an amazing YouTube channel with almost 700,000 subscribers, a super prominent figure in the space weather community, and I think a very pivotal figure in the coming future that I see. I am very honored to have you on, and thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. I think I want to get off into basically kind of the normie or the layman person to just briefly talk about what space weather is, to kind of initiate someone into someone who just has no idea what you're even talking about, because so many people unfortunately are asleep and aren't exactly keyed into all the nuances of the multiplicity of what's kind of going on in, I think, the greater I mean, not to sound hyperbolic, but universe. Just to kind of like a brief layman example, so they kind of are just kind of have a little idea of what space weather is and what you do.
Sure. Space weather is the study of how the sun affects the Earth. Essentially, this is everything from what's known as the solar wind. A lot of people think of space as a vacuum. It's not a vacuum. The sun is constantly in all directions putting out protons, electrons, hydrogen, helium, and these things are constantly interacting with the Earth. In more extreme circumstances, the sun can release what is known as a solar flare, basically an explosion of X-ray light, which can be bigger than the entire planet and the entire planet Earth, and it can push out extreme amounts of protons and electrons and hydrogen. When one of those hits Earth, we get an enhancement of the northern lights, the auroras, and the southern lights as well. And in the most extreme circumstances, they can actually put technological systems at risk. This has happened several times in the past, although to a more regionalized or local degree. But at any point, the sun could actually do something that takes out the entire Earth's power grids, basically sending us back to the Stone Age. And unfortunately, we're becoming more and more vulnerable to that for two reasons. One, we're becoming a more electro-dependent society and a more interconnected society, which actually makes Earth's power grids a better target for the sun. But also, Earth is losing its magnetic field, which is what protects us from the sun. And so we're just becoming more and more vulnerable. We know the sun releases something that big every 150 to 250 years. And unfortunately, it's been about 160 something years since the last one. And so we're kind of in the danger zone.
Yeah, to a lot of people, that's going to sound very scary, especially I think also because we've become in the last 100 years so dependent on technology that facilitates our entire life. During the pandemic, everyone was getting food delivered, and that was through the internet. Everything is so technology dependent. Most electric car, everything is just it's almost become too. We've reached like this Overton window where we have no survival skills. The average person has no survival skills, no hunting skills. Everyone's completely codependent on this system we facilitated, and we've truly created some sort of cognitive dissonance and taken all that for granted. And I feel like that's just something that's been interesting and been kind of popping up in, just that we really take, I think just so many people take for granted how, disconnected we are from nature, and how we've kind of facilitated this fake facsimile of just stuff that serves us that we completely just have cognitive dissonance and take for granted. So
a lot of normalcy bias.
Yeah, everyone is in this like, oh yeah, things are just they're just gonna, stay as they are, and there's no, change coming. Now something, getting into kind of also, future and past things, two major kind of topics I want to cover: the kind of unfortunately somewhat dystopic future, and the interesting part about our past that kind of has been brushed away and disregarded is the major floods. Let's do the past first, and then we'll get into the future, just because it's chronological. So I think something that is really amazing that I haven't seen ever, and that you seemingly have the same kind of Graham Hancock congruence with, is this sense that there was a major flood event, and this has been totally lied about and kind of intentionally covered up by, unfortunately, what you could colloquially call the elites in a cringe kind of way. It's been too popularized to this, like, everyone calls them the elites or the Illuminati, and it becomes overdone. But it seems like there are aspects of the flood myth and history that have been so pushed down or kind of scoffed at initial glance because it's deemed as religion. And I would love to just give your, to facilitate that scientific, because obviously, if anyone's seen your channel, which anyone who's going to watch this has probably seen your channel, you're definitely one of the smartest guys I've seen on YouTube who can probably articulate this point without seeming, I would say, too dogmatic in a religious sense. If you're comfortable talking about then the flood that happened, that's correlated with the Bible and the Old Testament and New Testament and what that kind of means in a sense. If you're comfortable talking about that, I could always add this on.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's now becoming pretty evident from not only the data that's been gathered over time, but some of even the most recent papers, that there was some kind of a catastrophe about 6,000 years ago. There was also one about 6,000 years before that, and 6,000 years before that, and 6,000 years before that, so on and so forth. And we're 6,000 years from the last one, and a lot of the other non-flood signals that the Earth gave at that time, they're already starting to become present, which makes us think that we could be due for the next one. In terms of the last one, there was a pretty darn severe flood in several parts of the world. Some areas were not hit as bad as others, but it definitely existed. There was, congruent with that, major tropical hydroclimate events and overall global climate shifts. There was a magnetic pole shift at that time, pretty bad volcanic activity at that time. And that is the case going back, seeing all of the 6,000 year events as far back as we can actually see them in the geologic record. And so we've really come to a point where, as a person of science, as a person of math, as a person of statistics, I have to take a look at some of these more religious or mythology or other stories like that and say, you know what, there's now too many congruences to just ignore. It's actually at a point where, as a man of science and statistics and math, I have to say we are at a statistical correlation of significance, where maybe these stories are telling a little bit more of history than they are something somebody made up and put in a book.
Yeah, and I've always had an intuitive knowing of, reading all the stories and, reading Greek history, and there's this, Promethean flood myth. The same, in all cultures, there's this flood myth that happens, and it's like, it obviously has to come from some either origin that it's one single story that, some guy made up, but obviously the statistical data just says, this actually did happen. And, I like that it's obviously finally being kind of admitted in some capacity that, okay, this actually did happen at some level, so that's it's just kind of nice to hear that, I don't know, being finally realized that, there's actually data to support some of these ancient stories that we've just completely ignored and kind of scoffed at the native cultures and of religion in general.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay, now next up, this is getting into kind of an interesting theory, and I want to kind of ask you about too, with the whole Elon brain chip and how he's kind of even admitted that there's this integration between technology and us, and he's like, oh, we're already cyborgs in a way, and he's also planning on literally making us cyborgs. What? And obviously, if there's some sort of solar storm or some sort of major catastrophe that puts this down, how would you think that that's going to occur in a sense where, and now let me articulate that where in a better formed question. How is the dependence and literal integration of technology that it seems like we're truly in the next, if the catastrophe doesn't happen in a sense soon enough, that there is this push for literal integration with technology. And if any sort of solar storm or major catastrophe where the power does go out, how do you think this is an intentional push at some level, or but getting into, I mean, I know this is a very big topic and it's
Right.
a
So
serious one too. But
it's hard to see Elon in the same class as like the World Economic Forum and other things like that. This Neuralink thing is probably the only thing Elon does that I really disagree with on a big way.
yeah.
I'm not sure he has the full awareness, although it kind of seems like he's the guy who should have the full awareness of all the risks from the sun, and especially with Earth's magnetic field changing. I would never cyborg myself. There's just no way. You're one solar flare away from basically having lightning arc discharge inside of your head. It's how much of it is intentional, how much is Elon Musk in on things, it's hard to say. I think he's definitely one of the geniuses of our time, all the things he's able to pull off. This is one of the ones I don't really agree with, but yeah, I would say there's a tremendous risk that comes along with how electro dependent and technologically dependent we are already. Taking us any further down that line and away from relearning what we've lost in the past is not a smart idea given the future that we have here on this planet.
Now, I'd also then just, that's kind of my little bit about Elon. I totally agree with you where that seems kind of, that sticks out kind of like a sore thumb with his that, like, why would you say that? That seems very off. But I think also you mentioned the World Economic Forum and the looming sort of dark elite that they have been seeming like they're kind of exposing themselves in a way to this coming catastrophe. And what's Origin? Blue Origin?
Or
Blue Origin.
It's right across the street from the mountain he's hollowing out. And he's literally going to be a couple 100 feet away from either going down under the ground or going up into the sky, whatever he feels like doing at that time.
So this is, again, kind of a serious, dark question. But why? And again, this is kind of maybe more too philosophical and too heady, but I would really, I guess, genuinely want to know. So why do you think a lot of this information that's coming out is being hidden and coverted in such a way? And why do you think they're so hell-bent on keeping the potential population of the world low?
The answer to that one is pretty simple. It requires stepping back one bit. So
yeah,
there's a dichotomy to everything. There are absolutely elites in this world who want major depopulation, who literally hate the rest of us. There are also elites who see themselves as Batman, who have messianic complexes and who want to save as many people as possible. A lot of them believe in karma and things like that. And with their great power comes great responsibility. Regardless of which side you fall on, secrecy is a must. If you're on the side that hates us, you want this to sneak up behind us and take out as many of us as possible. If you want to save as many people as possible, you still need to keep it quiet, because if everybody realizes what's going on, chaos and anarchy ensue. What rationale do people have to pay taxes, to go to their job, to be good people? Literally the entire world falls apart and you end up destroying everything that you'd want to save in the first place. And so no matter which side you fall on as an elite, you want to keep this quiet, whether you're trying to get as much accomplished to help us as possible, or you want us to be as blind as possible going into the scenario and have it smack us as hard as it possibly can. So the answer to that one's pretty easy. Yeah.
It's just the rationality and the darkness of just like the reality of what's going on, I think seems so unfortunately conspiratorial to what you would call like a normal person, that there are, there's a ruling class who does view themselves as Batman and like a Joker complex. Like they literally think they are actually Batman. Oh, I'm gonna save some like 4 people. It's like, what do you like? This is, they really truly believe that.
You truly believe it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like what's even going on? You brought up something also that they do believe in some sort of karma. They flip kind of their head on what they actually believe in terms of this attained enlightenment that they seem to have, and actually want to help the public as opposed to destroy them.
Well, so
That's
I would say only about half of them actually want to help us and think they're Batman. The other ones are literally doing everything they can to try to make things hard for us. And for them, they don't believe in the traditional karma so much. They believe in something called karmic retribution, which basically means as long as they give us enough information that somebody with a brain can tell what they're doing, they're going to get away with it. And the simple idea is, if I go to a market and I sell poison apples, you eat one and you die, I've murdered you and I'll pay for that. However, if I put up a sign that says poison apples and you still buy one and eat one, I'm absolved of any responsibility. It's karmic retribution. I don't know if you heard about the recent scandal with Balenciaga.
oh
How
yeah, yeah.
they had a bunch of children in bondage gear,
Mhm.
art of children being tortured. You could, if you zoomed in, you could see that in every single ad there were books and other things written by people who had either been convicted murderers of children or promoted pedophilia or other
Mhm.
things like that. You get one of those things that slips its way into one advertisement, it's one thing, but we're talking about dozens. And in every single one of them, there was just satanic, pedophilic, really degenerate stuff in every single one of them. And that was their version of karmic retribution. It's kind of like the World Economic Forum. If you just dig in, you can see them saying freedom is a bad thing. Free speech is a bad thing. We need to take control. We need to you need to eat bugs. You need to do this, that. They
Yeah.
literally tell us what they're going to do. And they believe
Completely
that
rewriting the Constitution too. Like they're, completely reinterpreting the original Constitution. They censor so many people, and then they will kind of admit that they're doing it and then act like they don't. That's a great way to kind of like do it, where they'll admit they're censoring you, but then they're like, oh, we're not really censoring anyone, but they're obviously are just lying through their teeth. When you're actually looking at the data and confronting it, it's like, okay, these are all conservatives, they're all censored. Okay, these are all the people. You just banned Graham Hancock and called him a white supremacist. Something like that, where it's like, so sorry, just to add on to that point.
no, you're absolutely right. And so
Yeah.
we have both of these things playing out in the mainstream and across the entire world, to the point where anybody who's actually trying to pay attention, who's not intentionally sticking their head in the sand, pulling an ostrich and ignoring it, can see that, okay, there are, like, this is what's coming. And the idea is that they're absolving themselves of any karmic retribution by telling us, and if we don't stop them from doing it or we don't fight back, we implicitly approve of what they're and so it's a rough situation that we're going into here as a planet. And getting back to what we talked about earlier, these are the kinds of things that are actually described in the Bible, and not just the Bible, it's in the Quran as well. The Bible calls him Satan, the Quran calls him Shaitan. It's unbelievable how much these God of Abraham or Abrahamic faiths really have hit the nail on the head, not only with what's happening to the earth, with what's happened in history, what's going to happen naturally in the future, but what's happening with society as well, which is another one of the reasons why, when you look across the totality of it from a civilization and from a natural sciences perspective, there's just too much to look at this thousands of years old book and say, that's nothing. Like, no, it's literally telling the exact same story, as well as the math and the observations that you get from a geological study will tell you.
Yeah, I think that's you hit actually on a great point that I actually wanted to cover. So thanks for reminding me, because it's actually kind of emotional for me, because my generation, from an intuitive space, I can definitely feel their sadness with when we have Instagram and TikTok, and this generation, it's almost unfathomable to other generations, because I'm only 23, so I've grown up with a lot of, unfortunate, um the generation has seemingly been so eroded of any sort of sense of morality, but also a sense of just purpose and knowing, where a lot of guys my age, and girls too, but I can obviously relate more to guys, that there's been just such a lost sense of hope that I can um, kind of feel from our generation, where this has been talked about, where we have stuff like TikTok and stuff where it's completely this weird, everything is just so filtered, everyone just basically puts on this cringe filter and doesn't actually have any sort of traditional archetypes or traditional roles. And we've really kind of bifurcated into this. You're either going to become some sort of like you're going to obsess about technology more and TikTok more, and not just, I'm just kind of projecting my own intuitive things, seeing my generation, but you're going to have a lot more of that, which is funny that the internet might eventually not be here, but we're having more obsession with just this numeral. Oh, I have more numbers, I got more things, instead of actually doing something that's actually going to start to mean more and be more productive in our own lives, and actually have some sort of upward trajectory of purpose. Just personally, in my generation, I felt that immensely when we're seeing a lot of just a lot of unfortunate sadness that these kind of books talk about during these type of times, where we're going to see such degeneracy kind of openly and unapologetically. Obviously, just recently, then we talked about Balenciaga, but with the Grammys recently, and with all this Lil Nas X videos and stuff, where it's just so open and so non-apologetic about the just degradation of societal norms, but not in like a reconstructive way where we can rebuild from it. It's just open degeneracy and open. It's not like these people are, happy in any sense or trying to do something fulfilling. It's just open degeneration. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. They're trying to destroy family values. They're trying to destroy tradition. They're trying to normalize degeneracy and other things like that. It really is. And, sometimes it's hard to know where the line is. You can walk into any law school in the country and listen to them talking about the idea of transgender individuals going in opposite bathrooms. And you can hear good arguments in either direction. But when you've got things like purely traditional values, ethics, morals, individuals being called terrible names, and then you have Lil Nas X twerking on the devil and he's celebrated, it's very black and white what is trying to, what's trying to be done there. For example, and I think if you actually go and you look into some of the numbers and data with things like this, it's not that hard. Like I'm kind of a big guy. If I put some eye makeup on and wear a wig and I walk into a women's bathroom, every woman in there should be terrified, utterly terrified, regardless of what I call myself. And there's just no getting around that whatsoever. For my wife, for my daughter, it's a scary future. And, for the people who have been most progressive about this, they let that biological man into the women's prison. He got 4 or 6 of the women pregnant.
Yeah, I just saw that. That was great. I know. That was. I know. It's unfortunate because it's laughable, but then it's like, wait, they're actually doing this. They're not even. This is like you think it's actually, like I even have my own cognitive dissonance when I'm watching it. It's like, oh, this is a movie, but it's like, no, this is actually happening, and it's like
clown world.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and funny enough, and I'm gonna, I've just kind of had the moment where I'm like, it doesn't matter if I get canceled for this, but even in Taoism metaphysics and in terms of the Chinese medicine, something I was noticing recently is that it is kind of a little black and white on terms of men are men and women are women in terms of how they view energy and how traditional Chinese energy is viewed. Medicine is viewed. It's pretty black and white on this is men, this is women, and we're basically, how they view us is like we're magnets essentially in a type of way. And you literally, the exercises, the whole philosophical principle is men have their own set of metaphysical chi, is it called? And women have their own set of metaphysical chi, and it's very different. And your your
You're making
reproductive
a
organ.
really good point. You're
Mhm.
making an excellent point because, all right, so let's go back to the trans example.
Yeah.
Men who transition to women, we've all seen them get angry online over the social stuff. Women who want to transition to be men, we've seen them get get angry online over the same kinds of things, but they don't get angry in the same ways. The women who, they can call themselves men, they can say they feel like they're a man trapped in a woman's body, but when they get triggered, they act like the emotional extreme of a woman, not a man. A biological man who transitions to a woman, he can say all he wants. He can feel that he's truly a woman, but when he gets triggered, she gets triggered, he acts as the most extreme emotional version of a biological male. And there's a disconnect between what these people are actually thinking. I mean, I don't know if calling it gender dysphoria is offensive or not. I think everybody should have the same basic equal rights, but it has to be noted that, biology, chromosomes, and the way people react when they are most emotional, it reverts right back to the gender norms. And that's really telling that this is not a actual whole body spiritual thing. There's something going on up here that is changing their perspective. And that's about all. That's about it. That's about the long and short of it.
Yeah.
I don't care if I cancel me. I do think it is important to recognize that basic human rights should be available to everybody. If somebody, I don't care if somebody is gay, straight, they think they're the opposite gender or whatever, they should be able to get married and love who they love. Basic stuff like that. They should be able to vote, be able to get a job. They should be able to do all those things. The problem is when that starts being pushed on everybody else. And that's not just the pushing of the paradigms, but even things like pronoun use. Like, someone else is free to call themselves whatever they want, but they cannot infringe on my free speech, and they can't force me to believe against biology. It's things like that. It's becoming minority / extremist rule. And if you don't like that, if you don't abide by it, you get canceled. And it's pretty impressive how well that has infiltrated the most influential aspects of our society, which is media, social media, entertainment, and government. Point where you really have to be on the ball in order to avoid falling prey to these things. And you have to have something inside of you. You have to have guts. Because I've seen people who get it, but they're just too scared to go against it. And whichever shortcoming.
Yeah, luckily the safe zones aren't in Canada because Jordan Peterson's getting his all of his licenses revoked because he dares to have some pushback. That same sentiment where he's like, you can do what you want, but you're infringing on my rights. And places like Canada and stuff in Europe, you can't. You really have people really. We don't have they don't have free speech there, and Australia too, which is just.
What's happening in Australia and New Zealand is crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. I can't believe what I watched over the last couple of years happen there.
Yeah, one person gets COVID and they make children, babies, and every person has to be vaccinated, and all the Aboriginals need to be vaccinated. It's like pretty absurd when they're talking about all this, because it upsets me so much. Because it's just so the level of hypocrisy when they're saying, when they're pushing all this diversity stuff, but then there's just this still overt bashing of all the native cultures that I just find so. It's so ridiculous to me that it's just they still do it even though they're acting like they're not, and they're acting like they're this integrated perfect person who's we're all into diversity, but then there's still kind of this archetype that they're just projecting on, which is the white person telling all the natives how to live. It's just like, what are you guys doing? It's just ridiculous. And then they're the ones with all the stories about that there's a flood coming and you got to respect nature because it's just funny.
I've talked with some people since we sort of went back into that direction, who say that what the Aboriginals and other, tribes around the world will tell scientists that they talk to, and what they tell each other is not the same thing, because they know that scientists will not accept their stories. They will not accept some of the things they know about how often this has happened, how long their histories truly go, and how many times they have seen the world destroyed by this event. They over time learned just to keep their mouths shut, and I can't blame them. But I know for me, I can't just keep my mouth shut about some of the ways that it's happening from our own society. I can't keep my mouth shut about what I know the sun and the earth are about to do to us. It does seem like things on the larger scale are going to keep going more and more and more in this direction. And it would, I think, probably be a beautiful bit of irony that right about the time we've almost lost everything and we are about to tear each other apart, the sun finally says, that will be all. Enough. You look up in the sky now at what's about to happen. So almost seems like a movie, to be honest with you. It does seem like a movie that's playing out right now.
Yeah, I've entered that state where personally, ever since actually March 20th of 2022, everything's just seemed like a movie. Everything's just seemed like I'm just in a completely simulation. I'm just, just, but this is yeah, it's we're entering that time. And especially what I kind of see in my own, I'll share this, that I see in my own visions and what I think is probably going to happen in terms of the sun's going to look like and how things are going to look in the next coming years when we do have some sort of solar storm. I would love to get your opinion, because I believe briefly in one of the live streams you talked about this, when we're going to have an eclipse. Oh, I forgot one of my most important, but don't you think it's interesting? Okay, now this is something I would love to get your opinion on, and just kind of talk about, because I was going to forget. And it's one of the this was one of the most like mind-boggling points that I heard, and I was like, this can't be right, and no one ever talks about this. Why is it so? I mean, we know why, but the point about the sun and the moon are exactly 1/400. The moon is the distance. How is it even possible? What is their explanation? And what is your opinion on how is the sun and the moon the exact same distance from its size so that we get these perfect eclipses? Because once you realize, oh yeah, please go.
Just in that same regard, people think of, the moon is tidally locked to Earth. It's actually not. The moon is rotating. It just rotates in a perfect way so that the same side always faces us. There are so many. There are so many things that, so when I was 21, I was agnostic moving towards atheist.
Yeah.
I have now seen enough from subparticle and subatomic physics to cosmological and galactic astrophysics to know for a fact that we are not living in some randomized universe that's the result of billions of years of chaos and collisions and gravity. Where we are right now was absolutely engineered. Someone engineered this place. I now have no doubt about it, and I am a man of pure science, statistics, and math. I have seen so many things from, like I mentioned, the very small to the largest scale, to the inner workings and the dynamics, math, sacred geometry, resonance, frequency. There's no way this happened by accident. There is just no way we are here seeing the things we see, experiencing this universe as it is by accident. That would be absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
To even begin for me to believe that now. I would have to have my head in the sand like an ostrich.
Yeah. I think that's just one of the, it's coming to be, especially with, I think that fact is just one that's so silly and absurd that no one brings up, that, our sun and moon are the exact same distance and size and no other planet actually, like, it's just ridiculous. And how it's tidally locked too, that, we perfectly only see one side. It's like, it couldn't be, it's just like you said it, better than I could, but it's just so absurd when you start to think. And then just to
No,
add
not
on
really.
really,
Like, there's many more. Like, the amount of time it takes for the sun to rotate once is
uh
one lunar orbit around the Earth. 28 point something days. It's the exact same thing. There's way too many
there's
coincidences for a man of science and statistics to say, oh, well, randomly, I guess this just happened in our part of the universe.
mhm.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Open.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And two other things too, which I kind of get. If I ever talk about this, people kind of look at me where I think like, well, also too. I mean, even it's coming out now in New German Medicine that they're saying that even sicknesses are just these negative traumas and things we've experienced, that they're much more even metaphysical. Even they're discovering now at like a low level is exactly what it's just correlating exactly with what Jung talked about and what kind of we were all kind of experiencing, which is this is like a negative trauma that you've almost experienced, and it's just a like a psychic projection that's happening in this 3 dimension that we're experiencing. And
Right.
they're realizing that all these traumas like that we've had, like cancer and all these extreme illnesses, are just these basically like traumas that are just almost transferred, and they're discovering that basically.
Yeah, I would say that applies to things like cancer and things like viruses more than it
Mm-hmm.
does to, say, an infection from bacteria or fungus. You
Mm-hmm.
know, some of those things are a little closer to what they say
Yeah.
in biological science, but especially the thing with the cancers,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just stress, but how do you view stress? Like, there are people who there was this great study where they took a bunch of people who were really stressed out all the time, and they measured their cortisol levels, month over month for years and years. But a segment of the pop of that group thought that their stress was bad for them and was going to kill them earlier, and the other one said no, like, stress keeps me at my peak. This is a good thing. Like, I can handle this stress. This is what I need to be the best. That group lived a lot longer than the group who thought negatively about it. So things like that, perspective, attitude, and then traumas. Some people get trauma and it ends up ruining their entire lives. Other people learn from it, learn to heal from it, use it to make themselves stronger. And there's virtually no great information at any large scale about this on the internet or in school or anywhere else. It's almost a lost or untouched topic that could be benefiting the lives of everybody alive right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Now, also, I think getting into just something I also want to get to is, since a lot of this, what kind of also some of the through thread, the thread of the conversation we've had is this, there's this deception element to this. There's this, this stuff is true in the papers that we don't really share. This information is true that Graham Hancock talked about 20 years ago, and it's kind of coming to the forefront. All these stories kind of are true in a sense. We've just haven't disclosed it. What do you think? And it's kind of topical now, but with the kind of false threat of this alien invasion and this potential war with, unfortunately, Ukraine, I felt it's kind of a need to talk. What I do fear nuclear war, but I also think that will it even? It seems like it's its own deception in a way, that it won't ever really happen because it's too cataclysmic in a sense to actually for someone to drop a bomb.
Right. So I think you're probably right about that. I think that the response to some of these false flag propaganda things that came out in the last 2 weeks, the response of the internet and of the people in the whole absolutely shocked them. They were really, from the UFOs to the we don't know how it's staying afloat. We can't tell what propulsion system it's using. CNN was basically saying UFOs and aliens are here, and nobody cared. Nobody panicked. Nobody freaked out. Nobody stopped going to work. No, churches weren't packed. Like, I think that they like tried to let this slip out, and then they were like, all right, wait for them to freak out. And then nobody cared. And I think that
Yeah.
I think that really threw them for a loop, because they were like, what in the world is happening? Like, did we make them too dumb? Did we distract them too much, or are they waking up? And I don't think they have it. I think it's a combination of those things.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Half the population is too smart to fall for their crap anymore, and the other half is too dumb and distracted with 15-second clips on TikTok to give a damn. So, yeah, that's not exactly a fantastic trajectory for the world to be on, but it'll be interesting to see where they pivot from here. That's for sure.
Yeah, I am too. I feel like, I mean, if this, this, this is a big one. With the, do you think they're going to, because we've talked about this a little bit with, infections and stuff. Do you think they're, again, it's about, the, how in that World Economic Forum, they talked about everyone getting, jabbed, and, having that as a means of transportation. And it's kind of been, through, Project Veritas, it's already been kind of, be very careful how I word this, seen by some of the employees. I don't know if you've seen that video, but you know where I'm going with this, and and thinking, is there going to be another system that's similar to this, where there's another antidote for a future infection that may be coming?
Yeah, it's hard to really know. The fact that Biden basically just put our national medical threat policy in the hands of the World Health Organization really kind of signals that, boy, they're going to try something else in that realm. I'm worried they're going to start throwing the kitchen sink at us. Literally everything. They're going to throw another pandemic at us. They're going to start trying to take away our freedoms, or introduce new restrictions based on climate nonsense. They're going to continue pushing the degeneracy. They're going to continue trying to cancel anything that is traditional values, traditional morals, or even just rational, logical sanity. And that it's all going to come at once. And that's really, really scary. I think that as hard as it has been to deal with the cloud world so far, I don't know why anybody would expect it to stop. I don't know why anybody wouldn't think it's going to get much worse. Not only because that's the trajectory you're on, but that's because that's exactly what the Bible says is going to happen too. So, welcome to the next round of the playoffs.
Yeah. And I've kind of felt that, and I wanted to bring that in because that's a good point too. I do feel this kind of, they are in the fourth quarter and they're going to try to pull some Hail Mary pass across the field, because they realize no one's buying what they're selling.
Right.
At a lot of levels.
It almost feels like our entire lives have been like, and I'm going to just use a football analogy.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like our entire lives were the majority of the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen the last, probably actually going back into the Trump administration, when the character of Trump allowed the rise of the anti-traditional movement. So, call that somewhere between 2016 and 2020. Then up till now was kind of like the wild card game of the playoffs, where, all right, this is the first stage. And now we're sort of entering what they would call the divisional round. And then there's going to be the semifinals and then the cosmic version of the Super Bowl. But that one's going to be controlled by the sun and the earth. Until then, this is largely in our hands. And after getting a look at the people in charge of this planet, I don't like that at all. I almost just want to be like, can somebody just wake me up when the sun turns red and the earth starts shaking, please?
I know.
Let me that. Don't make me have to deal with all this nonsense beforehand, please.
Yeah, I think we only got a couple more years left, hopefully, in a sense. I
Right.
think we got like a few more years of Clown World, and them trying to throw whatever they can at us. Which is, it just seems like such a movie. It seems like, oh, you're making it up for such a movie, but then you look at what they're doing and what they say and what's going on. You're like, how do you? It's just one of those moments where you go.
It's amazing how much it feels like the Matrix.
Yeah,
It really feels like the Matrix. You got people who
Yeah.
are waking up and trying to get their heads back into the real world. And those who aren't, at any moment they could become an agent. They are basically trying to project a false reality for everyone so that we can be used for whatever purposes they want. I'm starting to think that movie was a documentary, a forward-looking documentary. It's amazing how much that is. We need as many Morpheus and Trinity characters as we can have out there.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if we could find a Neo that could actively fight the Matrix at a great level.
Yeah. I
Still missing for the time being. Still
yeah.
missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's a lot to deal with, but I think knowing this and understanding that even though there obviously is this, they're going to throw the kitchen sink and there's this darkness coming. It's also grounding in a sense, and it will bring us together in a sort of way, in a sort of unfortunate way, obviously, that it's not all just like roses and we're in this lovely spring field yet, but in a sense it is kind of really congealing almost who should be together and who should kind of, you should almost, I know this is a kind of spiritual, but like spiritually kind of let go and kind of really know who your friends are in a sense.
Right. I can't agree anymore with that. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And again, I think this is it's a perfect conclusion. So thank you again. Thank you.
Pleasure being here. Thanks again.